Growing up, I had a bunch of friends with Nintendos, and as was kind of the custom when you're staying over at someone else's house, I spent a lot of time watching my friends play one-player only games like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, Goonies 2, The Legend of Zelda, and many others. They might throw me a bone and let me struggle against Glass Joe for a few minutes, but really the point was to watch whoever was the best player just get as far as they could. I myself played games like Faxanadu and Solstice as a kid, which are really hard games to explain to someone who's only trying them for a few minutes. As such, I always got really excited when there was a game my friend and I could play at the same time, especially if we were on the same team. If you've seen a lot of these 100 best NES games lists, you may notice that the games at the top generally skew more towards single-player titles, and that makes a lot of sense. Nowadays, rarely do any of us get together in person to play games, when the internet allows us to do so remotely. But since there isn't a ton of multiplayer available online for NES games, most people are experiencing these ancient titles all by themselves. Most two-player games of the time didn't have a story mode or anything like that. They were really just meant to be played with two players to enjoy fully. So if you were playing them solo, you'd be missing the whole picture. I watched a video the other day where this guy was saying he thought Bubble Bobble didn't hold up today. Sorry, but no fucking way. It may not hold up to play by yourself for 99 levels, but when you play it as a team, it's still one of the best two-player games of all time. There's just way more strategy, hilarity, and ultimately fun when playing with a partner. Anyway, this long rant of an intro is all to say that I think the cooperative games in the NES library deserve more of a spotlight. I've been hard-pressed to find a definitive list of every two-player co-op title, so I started making this ridiculous chicken scratch version for myself, and as of now I've counted maybe about 60 games or so in total. I've split them up into genres, and as I slowly convince my friends to join me and record some gameplay, hopefully I'll be able to cover every co-op game out there. We'll see. While certainly not the only genre for two-player co-op on the NES, for me the most fun pick-up and play with the buddy style of game is the beat-em-up. On the whole, they're generally pretty forgiving for novice players, but with enough variety in stages and enemies that it doesn't feel too repetitive. Seems like a good place to start with this series. For the sake of making sure I've properly separated these games by style, I'm going to define beat-em-ups as games where the goal is to thrash everyone on the screen before progressing either left or right or up or down to then pummel more bad guys. I got a bunch of footage for Kung Fu Heroes, but decided that ultimately this is more of an arcade style of game, since each level takes place on a static screen, and so we'll save that one for later. Joining me for this video as the Luigi to my Mario is my 9-year-old nephew Nathan, who just happened to be in town visiting from Colorado.
Hi!
He's never played any of these games before, or really any Nintendo Entertainment System game other than Rampage, so we had a lot of fun working on this together. Also, the footage you're seeing documents about how far we got in each title, so don't be surprised if I left out some of the more interesting later levels. Battletoads! Anyway, unless I miss one, there were only 7 two-player beat-em-ups for the Nintendo Entertainment System. So screw it, let's rank them just for kicks, beginning with number 7, which is Double Dragon 3. It says a lot about the quality of these titles that Double Dragon 3 is the worst beat-em-up on the system. But while there may be some debate about where the rest of these games should rank, I doubt anyone's advocating too hard for Double Dragon 3.
In your face.
It looks great, the sprites and backgrounds are top-notch, the music rocks, the control is really crisp and responsive, and this iteration of Double Dragon has a ton of moves, including the classic jumping spin kick, as well as this super rad jumping flip throw thing.
See you later.
The only downside? Yeah, it's notoriously difficult. Not only is the enemy AI tougher than the previous games, but you've only got one life with no continues. I'm sure there's some thumb-twitching wizards out there that could breeze through this guy without taking damage once, but Nathan and I can't make it past the first level. Sadly, this is also our experience with Battletoads. This game already has a reputation as the hardest game on the NES, but that's only half the story. It's actually the hardest two-player game I've ever played, and the only one I can think of where trying to play it with a friend is infinitely more difficult than trying it solo. This is true for 2 reasons. All the other games on this list have the option to choose whether the heroes can hurt each other as well as the bad guys. It's kind of cool to have this option since, hey, maybe you want to punch each other between rounds, but for the most part, you'll quickly realize that the no friendly fire option makes the gameplay way more fun. Battletoads doesn't have this choice, and you'll see very quickly that it's intentionally designed to make you collide with each other.
Wham bam, thank you ma'am.
The other fun crusher in play here is the continue system. In other beat-em-ups, when one player loses all their lives, the other keeps going until they lose all of theirs as well. But in Battletoads, when one person continues, the game stops, and once they select continue, both of you start back at the beginning of the level.
That's the end of that chapter.
It's one of the shittiest mechanics ever in gaming, and it will shatter any momentum or confidence that you and your partner had. Having to start these stages over again after suffering through what is already a ridiculously tough gauntlet is just too much. And I'm just talking about the first couple levels here. We didn't come anywhere close to the infamous Turbo Tunnel stage. The worst thing of all, if not for those two incredibly cruel handicaps, this would have been one of the best designed and most fun games on the NES. But that's okay, there's plenty more forgiving options, such as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade. I think if you ask most people over 30 what their favorite beat 'em up for the NES was, they'd probably say Turtles 2. It is a great game with an amazing soundtrack, fantastic sprite designs, and truly memorable levels. It was also an extremely popular title, and one that holds a ton of nostalgia for a lot of people.
Throw another shrimp on the Barbie.
For me, it doesn't rank higher because of the lack of variety in the combat. You can attack, you can jump kick, and if you time it right, you can do this jump swing attack. So yeah, 3 moves, and that jump swing attack is not only the most powerful attack, but also the most effective against every enemy. As a result, your best strategy is just to mash that over and over for every bad guy you face. And in this style of game, that gets real repetitive real fast.
Better call your mama.
Having said all that, this game is still a classic, and a huge influence on a lot of future titles like the Final Fight and Streets of Rage series. I'd definitely say it's still worth playing, but not as much as other games like Double Dragon 2, The Revenge. I still can't believe the original Double Dragon was one player. It's probably common knowledge, but I for sure remember playing it with both Billy and Jimmy. Maybe I was thinking of the arcade version? Anyway, the sequel Double Dragon 2 The Revenge remedied the situation by letting you and a buddy take to the streets again, except instead of your girlfriend being kidnapped, this time she's been brutally murdered. Bummer! In Double Dragon 3, she's been kidnapped again, but maybe that's another side piece? I don't know. I'm not honestly trying to dig too deep into the lore of Double Dragon here, I just thought it was funny.
How do you know cartwheels, and how's that hurting anybody?
Double Dragon 2 features improved graphics, more enemies, new moves, and some cool stage designs.
When we climb up, it looks like we have butts on our face.
It's basically what Super Mario 3 was compared to the original Super Mario Bros. My only nitpick is the attack system, where the A and B button represent either the punch or the kick, but they alternate depending on which direction you're facing. You kinda get used to it, but for the first stage at least, you'll be furiously kicking at nothing, while simultaneously getting pummeled from the other side. Thankfully, the developers switched it up when they made Battletoads Double Dragon. So now we've covered Battletoads and 2 Double Dragon games. So what would happen if you combine the 2 into a super game? Well, you get one of the best NES games ever made. This motherfucker right here is the real deal. The graphics are way ahead of the competition, although like every other game on this list, there's definitely still some sprite flicker where your character kind of disappears sporadically when there's too much going on the screen. At its core, Double Dragon Battletoads is a best of both worlds combination of the 2 game series.
Did you want change with that?
With more focus on combat than platforming, but still with tons of quirky stages to break up the left to right, destroy everyone in sight staple of the genre. There's so much detail and nuance to everything here. My favorite aspect is that in each section you get new moves that differ depending on which character you chose. And man, some of these are so damn satisfying to pull off.
No more hair, lady.
The obnoxious continue system from Battletoads is carried over here for some horrible reason, but because the difficulty is tapered off quite a bit, it's not as big of a deal to restart each level once someone runs out of lives. This is probably the most obscure and expensive title on this list, but it's absolutely one of the best hidden gems on the system. So if you haven't given it a spin, grab a pal and get to it. I guess that's actually true for all these games, especially River City Ransom. For me, this was a game I'd never heard of as a kid, and it wasn't until way later that I learned about it by reading many of those aforementioned best NES games lists. River City Ransom takes the basic combat style of Double Dragon,
Nice to meet ya.
but adds in a non-linear exploration aspect along with an RPG-style leveling system where you gather money to upgrade your stats and your attacks. The game has a ton of charm, with lots of funny quotes and hilarious expressions coming from beaten enemies. Oddly enough, my favorite part of the game is hoarding money, so that you can try all these different food items just to see which stats they enhance. It sounds silly, but there's something very exciting about exploring the various malls and shops just to see if you can raise your attack or something. This maybe wasn't the best game to casually play with my nephew, since you really need to spend some time to grind and perpetually upgrade in order to progress past the first few scenes.
Batters up.
And in that way, River City Ransom is probably the least accessible game on this list, since you really have to dedicate some time in order to maximize your gameplay experience. While the other games on this list can generally be beaten in half an hour or so, River City Ransom could take 10 hours or more, especially if you don't know where you're going or which items give you the most bang for your buck. My nephew's favorite game that we played was Battletoads Double Dragon, but River City Ransom was actually the one he had the most thoughts on as far as how to play longer and get better. That says a lot about how engaging and unique the game's design is. And for sure, the same can also be said for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3: The Manhattan Project. And finally, we come to Turtles 3, my pick for the best two-player beat-em-up on the NES. In many ways, this is just a souped-up version of Turtles 2, with longer stages, more enemy types, more traps and backgrounds to interact with, better graphics, and overall a more enjoyable experience. And that's almost entirely due to the improved combat system. In Turtles 3, you can attack and jump kick like before, but you can also flip enemies by pressing down and B, and if you press A and B together, you'll do a super move which is unique to each turtle.
What did the 5 fingers say to the face? Slap!
Each downed enemy gives you points, and at 50,000 points and then 100,000 points, you get an extra life. And here's where the real strategy comes in. The basic attack, which takes 2 hits to kill, yields the most points, but also leaves your character vulnerable. The flip move kills most of them in 1 hit. It can also damage an enemy behind you, but gives way less points. The super move is extremely effective, but it takes a unit of life with every use, until you get down to 1 last hit. It also generates the fewest points, so it's best saved for boss fights, or for wrecking everyone in sight when you're almost dead and have nothing left to lose.
Now that's what I call a slam dunk.
So basically you need to think about the risk versus reward at all times in order to maximize your extra lives, while also taking the least amount of damage. It sounds pretty dry when I describe it like that, but following this mentality makes playing Turtles 3 not only really fun and engaging, but also pretty stressful, especially when you know you're about to get a pizza if you can only just hold out a little bit longer against that mini-boss. TMNT 3 is the easiest game on this list, and even casual players should be able to make it pretty far, but it's still a beat 'em up, and you're going to get hit a lot.
Here's a quarter. Call somebody who cares.
Only through learning the stages and carefully choosing your attack methods will you and your buddy be able to make it to the end. And even then, there's no guarantees. Turtles 3 is tons of fun, and since the difficulty is really well balanced, it's a great one to pick up and play with anyone, regardless of age or experience with beat 'em ups. And that's it. Hopefully I'll never use the term beat 'em up again for the rest of my life. It's lost all meaning. My conclusion for this is all these games are pretty fun, even Double Dragon 3. If there's any titles on here I mentioned that you haven't tried, seriously, invite a friend over and give them a shot. You won't regret it. If there's any beat 'em ups I missed, please let me know in the comments, because if so, I really fucked up. A huge thanks and shout out to my favorite nephew Nathan for coming through and helping me out with this. Y'all have no idea how excited I was that he wanted to make a games review while visiting. I don't know why other people make videos on YouTube, but knowing that he watches these is most of my motivation for creating them. Also, many thanks to my wife Eddie for 1, putting up with me, and 2, helping me get some extra footage when I realized I didn't have enough 2-player to show here. I've got a whole convoluted list of other 2-player co-op titles to cover in the future, so as I lure more of my family or friends over to help me record footage, I'll start releasing more in this series. Until then, enjoy hearing me stumble through all these fringe titles that I'd never heard of until I delved too greedily and too deep into the NES library. I don't know, I'm trying to switch it up more to keep myself engaged more than anything, but if there's something that y'all want to see or a type of video y'all prefer, please let me know in the comments. Or don't, and sit back while I tell you all about Last Ninja, Phantom Fighter, or Rocket Ranger. Either way, I'm happy. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Hey, Sue.